there. So, hi everyone, my name's Steve Benn, and firstly, it's great to have you on board. So, just give me a second there. And like I say, today we're going to be talking about webinars with the undisputed expert of webinars. His name's Stephen Renton. I met him back, I think, in March. I'd known him online for a little bit before that. And basically, he's done a really great job of helping me out. He helped me to generate basically over $60,000, $65,000 in fact, from one webinar. So with that said, let me introduce Stephen Renton, the webinar master.
Thanks, Steve, and hi guys, it's good to be here. Always nice when you have a couple of little technical difficulties to sort out at the beginning of the call, just goes to show we're all human, and you don't worry too much about that kind of stuff. It all adds to the rich tapestry of doing online presentations. So thanks for having me, Steve.
Oh, thank you very much, and thanks for putting up with all the technical snafus and mistakes that we've had up until this point. So I wondered if we could just start off basically by you explaining a little bit about who you are and how you got started. I know a lot of people will be really familiar with you and basically will know your story, but for those who don't, can you just tell us a little bit about how you got started with webinars?
Sure. I was originally an IT consultant. I did a lot of systems analysis work for very large companies. Worked all around the world. It was kind of fun, but at the end of the day, you're still working for somebody else. And a few years back, I started hearing about internet marketing and wasn't quite sure whether to jump into it or not, if it was real, if things could work, if it was just a big scam, of, people just making up things, trying to get you money. And I came across a guy in London who won the Internet Summit Award for Best Speaker, and I figured, okay, if he's just been given an award in London, he's a real person, he's not just some online guy you don't know anything about, and I'll go and do some work with him, I'll mentor with him. And this is going back probably 3, maybe 4 years now, and he was specializing in webinars back then, before they became popular, before anybody had auto webinar systems. And basically he built a system with a friend that was doing automatic webinars and replays, so he could be off living his life, having fun at a restaurant, at the bar, on holiday. And these automated webinars were playing the messages and making sales, and his phone was just lighting up all the time with all these sales. And we were trying to decide what I was going to specialize in, and the idea came to me that that was actually what I wanted to do. I didn't want to learn 15 different types of marketing, little tricks and tactics, and have to learn a new thing every 6 months. I decided I want to specialize in the big thing that allows you to bond with your audience quickly, develop real trust, make higher ticket sales, and just go straight for the jugular with that and not have to worry about several other smaller projects. And that's why I got started in webinars.
Right, that I think kind of clears up how you came to webinars. And I'd encountered you, like say, a little bit beforehand, and I'd encountered webinars actually through my wife, who was actually working sort of in a corporate environment. I noticed they were doing a lot of these webinars. They were paying huge amounts of money. And I started using them for content. And then I started doing this whole thing where I was going to different niches, working in different areas. And it was really at that point I thought, there's got to be a way I can actually sell things of higher ticket prices. Because for me, it was kind of like, these are niches that don't know me very well.
Sure.
Can I literally just sell via a sales page and make a lot of cash? And I remember you actually introduced me to Webinar Alchemy, which is a fantastic system, and I've been sort of talking about it all this week to people. One of the things I asked was for people to send their questions in. So if it's okay with you, I'd just like to go through a few of these questions. And the first one is, why actually use webinars? I think I've given a little bit of an explanation why I do, or like I said, I started off with content and then went into actually using them for sales as well. But from your perspective, why should people use webinars?
I would say it's more of an element of trust in developing a bond with somebody. Back when internet marketing first started off, you could get away with putting a sales page up and people would be so impressed and they'd believe everything, and you could sell a lot of stuff. And that still happens, especially with lower ticket price products. There is a trend developing today where people are needing more reassurances and more trust. They realize that anybody can put a sales page up claiming anything. You can have fake testimonials. So as soon as you get back to a selling environment where you have more of a communication, more of a two-way communication with your audience, where they can ask you questions, they can actually see you on a Hangout like this, or they can hear you on a webinar, it's getting back to more traditional selling. And in the real world, the highest converting means of selling is obviously face-to-face. If you have a salesman in the showroom, you can see how you're reacting to the sales message, you can adjust his sales techniques accordingly. And these are all things that you can replicate on live on-air events, as my microphone, my earpiece drops out. You can do polls and surveys on webinars. You can interact with the audience. They can raise their hands if they don't understand what you're talking about. They can ask you questions. So it's a very interactive environment. So there's a lot of feedback. There's a lot of intel that you get immediately. And there's no way you can get that from the sales page. So for that, it's the perfect sales meeting, especially when you're going to higher ticket items. People need more reassurances to be comfortable to buy, to part with those higher levels of cash. And I guess that's exactly what you experienced when you did that webinar.
I think that's a really key point, isn't it? That it's that whole element of trust, because you're right, anybody can put together a sales page and somebody can create this great persona for themselves, but it's actually much easier to get to know people, and you can actually attend a live event like a webinar. You can actually, in many webinars, people actually answer questions, things like that. So there's that interactive element. And plus, as we've just seen today, it actually also shows that we're all human as well, and it hasn't got that kind of slightly overly polished thing that a sales letter can have. It's a little bit live, it's entertaining, it's engaging. There's that whole sort of trust element there. I mean, I think most people know that webinars really sort of, would you say from sort of 2010, 2011 really became the way to sell online?
I'd say so, definitely in the last couple of years. And there's an interesting statistic you can look in if you look at Google Trends, which I will probably demonstrate on the webinar later this week. If you type in the term webinars, you can actually see the trends and where it started. Basically 2004, 2005 was when they first appeared, and there's a huge curve right up to modern day, and it's showing you an actual progression into the future. It gives you an estimate of the interest in webinars, and it's going to be a pretty hot topic for the next couple of years at least. So the other thing I wanted to mention as well is when you're designing your sales message and you're doing sales pages, it can be quite complicated to get the right sales page written. So for example, if you're bringing in a professional copywriter, I've done this myself in several projects, you have to bring in a professional copywriter to write the copy, and sometimes if you don't get it quite right, it's a very expensive process to be testing and tweaking the copy and changing it and having rewrites done and having the pages redesigned. Whereas in a webinar, you're basically putting your slides together yourself. You don't need a professional designer to do it, because that's much more of a real bond with the audience, and they're getting your personality and your voice and your mannerisms. So you don't have to be as polished that every single word has to be perfect to have a psychological hook or a trigger or all of this kind of ninja stuff that goes into sales pages. So if you do a webinar, it's not converting that great, okay, it's not so much of a disaster, because you just have to rework the slides yourself, and you can change what you're saying around quite easily. The great thing as well is you get reporting, real-time reporting from the webinar as well. So at the end of the webinar, you can do an analysis of when people were most actively engaged with you. It will show you when they dropped off. So if you find out that, say, 35 minutes into your presentation, half of your audience disappears, you know at that point you were just missing the mark and talking about something that bored them, and that's the section you should strip out and go and change and put something more engaging, or add a contest, or put some kind of engagement techniques in there to draw them back in and keep them engaged in your message. So there's a lot going for webinars and online events, so I'm a big advocate actually work together.
From my perspective, because I come from a place where I was just writing loads of sales letters, I always found the most effective sales letters were the ones where I actually put a little personality across. And whenever I've been advising anyone, I've always said, try and communicate something of your personality and who you are. And the great thing about webinars is you get to do that in terms of your voice and your responses and your interaction. And you really get to put yourself across there. So I think it's a lot easier for people to bond with and trust you, like you just mentioned, Stephen. Now, moving on to kind of to the next question, and this might be a hard one to answer. I'm kind of kidding that. I know a lot of people are keen on this one, though. How do I run a webinar if I don't have a list, if I don't have my own email list?
Sure, that's a common question that I do get asked. And there's a great case study inside the course. I talked to a lady from England again as well called Jo Barnes. And Jo started off with webinars, I guess a couple of years ago now. She was new to marketing and she didn't have a list. She was specializing in Facebook. I think she was one of Chris Farrell's original students. So she decided that she was going to do a lot of really small content pieces, do some reports, do some videos. She spent about $100 developing an app. She outsourced it on a site called Elance, and had some programmers do her a small app. And what she did was put together these really great content-only webinars and give away this app for free. So it might not make a lot of sense to people straight off the bat on how she can monetize that, how that would help. But she basically built a list of 17,000 people from scratch just by doing this. So just by giving away great content, doing webinars, being really friendly, being bubbly. Jo was actually known as the queen of webinar disasters by her own list, because when she was doing webinars, she made every mistake she could. And I think her first webinar, she couldn't even find the off button. So she's in hysterics trying to find out how to switch these things off. And word spread that her webinars were so much fun because there was always so many technical problems. People would just come in droves to see what she was going to do next. So she built this list of 17,000 people, and she was always scared to try and pitch a product or to sell something in a webinar. She'd only be doing content so far. So it got to the point where she realized that she was going to have to overcome this and put out a paid webinar event. So she put together a course. I think she was charging $97 for that. And by the time that she was ready to do this, everybody loved her with content. They knew her. They trusted her. She put this out, and she made $127,000 in the first week with her first ever sales webinar. So that's my go-to study that I use when people say, well, I haven't got a list, how can I do this? That's exactly how you do a list. She didn't use any paid media. She didn't have any JVs. She had no resources to start with. This was purely using free social media, videos on YouTube, posts on Facebook, and tweets on Twitter. That's it. And within a few months, with 17,000 person list.
That's I'm almost speechless. That's absolutely absolutely phenomenal. I know for a lot of people who've contacted me via Facebook, via Twitter, via email, that was one of the really big questions, and it's phrased in various different ways. But it all basically came down to, can I do this without a list? Because the two problems you tend to encounter when you're starting out is maybe you don't have a product, maybe you don't have a list. Some people have one or the other. A few people have neither, and some people, have both. And so the next kind of logical question is, Stephen, what do people do if they don't actually have a product they're ready to sell?
Well, again, that's one of the great things about webinars is that not a lot of people are using them that much. I mean, it may seem, if you're in the internet marketing niche, that you're getting invited to webinars every single day. So because people have found this so effective, people are using them a lot, but certainly in different niches, they're virtually unheard of. So it's very easy if you go to a product creator, say you're in the health niche, you go into one of the sites like ClickBank or NanaCast or Commission Junction, find a product that's converting really, really well, and then contact the product creator and say, listen, I'd like to do a webinar as an affiliate selling your product. Do you mind if I get access to this? Can you help me with some materials? Generally, if you have a long-form sales page, that's almost all you need to put together a webinar. You've got all the content, you know what the product is, you can go over it, you know its quality because it's converting well, and you can drive traffic to the webinar just as an affiliate alone, and you can usually cut deals with people that way, because some product creators haven't got time or they're not interested in doing webinars. So you can do that. There's other JVs that will have webinars that you can run as well. So once you do develop your list, as Jo did, then you've got a list of buyers and you can present them to other people's webinars as well, which is a big thing in typical strategy in the marketing terms, where you present your webinar, you can do a reciprocal mailing to somebody else's webinar, then you're building your list with all these other buyers from the other person. These people are getting exposed to your marketing message and your audience, and you're actually making a lot of money as well, because if you partner with good people, your webinars are going to convert well. So it's kind of a win-win situation. So once you do get started on the first step of the ladder, and you've actually got products or you've got a list, it's your incremental changes just come faster and faster.
I think that's what I found so sort of powerful about using webinars, because before I'd just been using them for content and branding, which I know you do talk about in Webinar Alchemy. But what really helped me was the fact that I was going into a niche where I don't think anybody had ever actually seen a webinar before. And you mentioned about how there are a lot of areas where webinars just aren't used, and it absolutely blew me away. Like almost every sort of non-IM, non-sort of money-making niche that I've looked at, virtually none of them have ever had webinars, and so it's really powerful to kind of take it in there. But I also think as well, in the sort of make money space, you have also got these opportunities to work without a product or to work without a list. And I think there are a few sort of areas where you can actually do that so easily. And the other great thing about webinars is, as I kind of, I already was aware of it in a way, but it kind of hammered it home in Webinar Alchemy, that you can get started within a few hours. You can have put everything together, and then you actually run the event, and at the end of the event, you've got all your cash. It's not like running sort of a 2-week process. I mean, you can extend it to that, but literally you can actually be getting the sales in.
Sure.
Sort of within,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I literally was going to say, you're literally going to get the sales in as soon as you've actually got to your pitch at the end of the webinar. It's an amazing actual sort of, money loves speed type thing.
Yes, and that puts me in mind of one of the more advanced topics. And there's a great case study from last year. There's a couple of marketers called Robert Stokes and Ryan McKinney, who they've now teamed up to be part of Daredevil Marketing. So Robert came to me last year and he said, "Hey Steve, my webinar is doing okay. I think there's some help. Can you look over this and help me with this?" So I worked with Robert on his first product creation webinar. And he made, I think, about $40,000 in the first 3 times he ran the webinar. But we tweaked it and changed it. I explained a lot of the ways to position a webinar for running to JV partners rather than just your own list, because Robert was a bit of a talker. So he'd get on the webinar, he would just talk, and you had to basically camp out for the night and make sure you got smoothies and food and snacks, because Robert wasn't going to stop until the last person dropped. Which is great, and it's great for bonding and people get a sense for who you are. It's not great for sales, especially when you're running it to a partner, because they don't want to be stuck on your webinar for 3 hours. Going, "Oh my God, would you please just shut up and let me get back on with my life?" So we worked and tweaked on that. Robert got his webinars down pat, and then he went on to do, I think it was $240,000 last year with webinars. Not all from his own, but because he could do webinars with other partners and then do recips. It's, as I mentioned before, it kind of feeds into itself and then it snowballs. So they did really well with that. The interesting thing about that first webinar, he then taught Ryan, who wasn't his partner at the time, but Ryan had an opportunity to do a webinar to another JV partners list, but he had no product and he had no webinar. So they had 12 hours to get this together overnight, so it was a big coffee session. And they created this webinar presentation for a product that didn't even exist yet. And this is a method you can use with webinars as well, because if you say your product is going to be a training course run over 6 weeks, and the training course is going to be delivered by a webinar, you don't actually have to have your product first. And it's a great way to test your market, because if you do a webinar to your list and you tell them all this fantastic product that's going to teach them X, Y, and Z, and nobody buys, you pretty much know that you shouldn't be developing that product. And that's a good way to figure out what direction to engage your audience before you spend 2 months, 3 months, or even longer developing a product, just to find out that your great idea that you thought everyone was going to love kind of misses the mark. So they can be used in that way as well. It's very powerful.
So yeah, what you're saying is it's a great way to test the market, so you don't go and create some massive product without sort of any real sort of actual demand out there. Because sometimes I've done this where you think there's demand for a product, you put it out there, and there really isn't. What I really love is the fact that I think you said it was Robert, wasn't it, that actually created his product after he'd done the webinar, and he actually used the webinar to actually create, I think it was weekly sort of events, wasn't it? And that was the actual content of the product.
Yes, yeah. So that's another great thing, because if you're doing a webinar launch and your product is delivered by a webinar, you don't have to have it beforehand, but then you can record, say, the 6-week sessions, and at the end of that, you can repackage that into a separate product as well. So obviously it's no longer live, but you have got the training, you have tons of material that you can repurpose and position. You can use some of it for small lead magnets or any number of different things. But it's fantastic for generating content, and generally what will happen is your audience will be asking so many pertinent questions that you may not even have thought about before. So it's a very interactive experience, and the product creation gets basically taken to a whole new level. So it's pretty powerful.
It really is, isn't it? I loved actually within sort of Webinar Alchemy how you actually talked about figuring out who the most engaged people are, figuring out what they want using polls and questions. And this was all stuff I was completely not aware of beforehand. I had no idea that you could really go to that level of figuring out exactly what people want and figuring out if you're actually connecting with people and engaging with them. That was really, really powerful for me. I think it made a huge, huge difference to my own results.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point of a webinar, because a lot of people will say, well, can I just do auto webinars to begin with, and I don't have to turn up live? But you're missing the whole point. The whole point of your webinar is really live interaction, this backwards and forth with your audience, and it's really great for intelligence on what your audience wants. You're going to get so much feedback from that and realize that, okay, maybe I thought they wanted this, but they actually want this. And if you just throw up an auto webinar, which is basically just a video player playing a video and faking a webinar, then you're missing out on all of the important aspects. And it has a place later on once your webinar is converting, it's a good as you go, and you find different ways of driving traffic to it, and you don't want to be doing a webinar every day of the week, regardless of how much money you're making, then auto webinars come at that point. But certainly until you've tweaked and converted, then you shouldn't be doing it. And I'll be, excuse me, playing with my ear the whole session, but I just got a new earpiece which keeps dropping out every couple of minutes. So more technological problems.
Yeah, it seems like audio and earphones. Yeah, just a whole heap of trouble sometimes. And you were just mentioning actually how on webinars people can actually drop in questions, and I've actually got another question for you now to just come in, and it's basically, what should I offer? So I think the thing behind this question is there's almost so many options about what you can sell. And you just spoke about, Robert, actually using webinars to sell webinars. What would you recommend when people are starting out? What would you recommend they actually try and sell via a webinar, if that's not too much of an open question?
Okay. What I would recommend when people are first starting out, just to take some of the, I guess, the nervousness, the pressure off them, is really what Joe was doing. Because there's nothing worse if you've never done a webinar before, you've never made a product, you've never sold anything before. That's a lot of pressure to put yourself under all of the start. Oh my God, I've got to create this, I've got to get on, I've got to be engaging, I've got to sell stuff, I've got to go into sales mode at the end, and people just start freaking out. And from what I hear, public speaking is one of the things that people are most scared of. And I think it's a statistic that most people are more scared of public speaking than are dying, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, I know which I'd rather do. But what I tell people is don't worry too much about sales. Worry about getting the webinar down, giving content, building that trust, building the value with the list. Once you've got used to that and the technology, you're comfortable with presenting, and it's really easy just to get on top of people and teach something and not worry about selling something at the end. Do that first. Get people engaged, get them to love you, get them to trust you, and then worry about the product. And when you get to that stage, if you've got an audience and you're an expert or perceived expert in a specific area, it's really easy to find a product or make a product from there. So like, okay, people like this, they're asking lots of questions about this subject. I'll go and find an affiliate product I can then market to them, do a little bit of research, find out if it's really good, and then get an honest evaluation and a review and market that. I think somebody should invent new earphones. I'm going to find a person who invented these and smack them after this is over.
Great new product, sell it by webinar. Yeah,
exactly. Earphones that actually stay in during a Hangout. There you go. Boom. That's what your first product should be. I'll buy it.
Yeah. Do you know, I think that's actually a really good point about webinars, because one of the things I've been doing, I'm sure I'm not the only person, is I've actually started using them offline as well, just to actually get sort of local business owners in various different areas actually on board. And I know from speaking to you earlier that people do use webinars to sell physical products as well. It's not just limited to digital products. So like I said, I've been using them offline now. So actually charging people to attend a webinar, an actual paid webinar. And like I said, I know people as well are selling physical products. Back sort of in 2005, I used to sell physical products, reasonably high ticket price. I honestly wish I'd known about webinars. I think I could have done so much better back then.
Sure. Well, I was doing an interview with a good friend about 2 weeks ago, and I think Ezra Firestone, from Smart Marketer, and Ezra is very much in e-commerce. That's his specialty. And I was chatting to him. He uses webinars for all of his real-world brands. One of his brands is very much cosmetics for the older generation. So he uses webinars very effectively for customer engagement, for branding, for developing that trust, and of course that leads on to more sales as well. He's actually used webinars also for selling very expensive real estate in Uruguay. When he first started off, he was using webinars for these large plots in Uruguay and making quite a nice living from that. I've also got another friend called James Brand who's over in Tokyo, I believe. He's over in Japan. I think he's in Tokyo. And about a year back, he was doing really well with webinars selling physical products. It was a high-end water filtration system. You know, the kind you put on your taps, so that when you're drinking water, it's all hugely purifying and there's nothing nasty in it. But he figured out this high-end brand would be a great fit for the market with mothers with newborn babies who are fanatic about making sure that everything is perfect, clean, and germ-free. So he started using media buys for these, putting adverts in the magazines, in the online sites for all the new mothers with babies in health niche. And he literally sold millions of dollars worth of this physical water filtration system by using webinars, because if you could drive people onto it and then explain to them why it was really a good product, why they should be using it, the benefits, and you got a long time to build up the desire for the product before he found out it was like $3,000, something crazy. But by that point, he developed the trust of the audience, he I guess, demonstrated the value, and they were just absolutely making a fortune. So I think the gist of that rambling story would be there's a huge blue ocean out there of things that can be done with webinars, and people aren't addressing it yet. They all think, oh, I've got to sell information products, I've got to do it to internet marketers, which is probably the worst market you could think about using them from, because it's always a novelty of a new medium that goes crazy. We're using Hangouts right now, and as you can see on the screen, Steve's got it all looking very slick and like a CNN presentation. And this is another element you can add into the mix, that if your audience has seen too many webinars, you bring them onto a Hangout, and then again you can see your visual presentations. They can actually get more of a feel for you through body language. They can see that your earphones don't work, and there's a whole bunch of stuff again that's more of a bond with your audience. So it's a little disconcerting to be on camera. I prefer webinars. I think I have a face for webinars. But it's a great selling medium, and again, the more and more you get comfortable with this, I guess it will become more prevalent because bandwidth's improving, people like video. There's another element, a whole new level of trust involved by seeing us talking, having a conversation, than it is seeing some slides and some pictures with a voice behind it. And both have their place. There's a case study that's involved in the product by a very smart marketer over in Florida, and he uses webinars and Hangouts in the same campaigns very, very effectively, to the point that he's making about a 10x return from most other people using only webinars. So it's a fascinating thing to learn about, and that's all we're kind of covered in the course of the
right there, those two things. I mean, you talked about Ezra and you talked about the guy in Florida, and I'll not talk any more about that, although I have actually seen it. It's absolutely mind-blowing, just the content you shared there. It's just like, wow, I would never have even thought real estate in Paraguay? What? That's just absolutely mind-blowing. There are just so many opportunities, I think, for webinars. Back to the questions is, when I was actually, I think it was sort of late April, early May, when I was actually doing the webinar, which, essentially you'd completely rescued from, it would have been a complete non-event. What I found was that because I was entering a niche where I wasn't very well known, and a lot of the people who came on probably never even heard of me, they were just interested in the topic and like, well, what's this webinar thing? It actually gave me a certain level of authority. Now, if you saw the start of this Hangout, I probably destroyed all sense of authority by having like a million echoes going on and things like that. But still, with webinars, what I found was it actually gave me this sense of authority. And you'll notice a little while back, I just put this little sort of lower third, as it's called, on to make it look a little bit like CNN. So it just says there, Steve Benn, Webinar Alchemy Live. And one of the things I actually really, really love about Webinar Alchemy is it comes with this newscaster software, which is just absolutely it's absolutely insane. This just literally the fact that we can actually add things on like this. Could you just talk us a little bit through it, and then I'll show some examples?
Yeah, sure. That's one of the reasons some people get confused about online presentations, because obviously there's the webinars, which is the main tool that a lot of us use for selling, and then there's Hangouts, and people say, well, are Hangouts replacing webinars? Are they taking over? Which should I use? And as we just kind of discussed a little earlier, my answer would be you should be using both. There are pros and cons for both. Obviously, in Hangouts, you can see people, you can actually hear their voices, and you can see the video, which you can't on a webinar. But there are restrictions on a Hangout. For example, if we wanted to look at the questions and answers, what Steve is doing right now is monitoring a separate page on YouTube where he sees the answers. So really, if I was doing a sales presentation, I wouldn't want to have to be looking at two separate pages and trying to talk through slides and keep a track of this. That would be a complete pain in the backside.
Yeah, it is, because I'm constantly sort of having to switch a little bit. So I can look at you and I can look at the questions. It's a little difficult, if I'm honest. Yeah,
so Steve's not actually looking at his news feed from Facebook. He's looking at the questions from YouTube. He's not bored. And also, in a Hangout, you can't give it a URL in the same way as you can in a webinar. So that's when these lower thirds come into use, because you can program these to say anything you like. There's different formats and different colors. So at certain points, you could be talking about a different thing. As Steve's just changed it now. You can give your URLs where you can go and check out the product. You can either flash out as many different messages as you like. And it takes literally a couple of minutes to set this up. The other thing that I think is really, really cool, and we were going to try and do this today, but it's a little cloudy outside, and the guys here to do the pool, and we've actually been chasing all the gardeners and the pool staff away all week while we've been doing other work. But when you're using a Hangout and this app, you can actually do it from your phone or your iPad as well. So any mobile device, you could be doing one of these Hangouts. You don't need to be sitting in an office like I am or like Steve is. You could go out to a client site, and as long as you have a reliable form of internet, you can be running your Hangout with this video, with the lower thirds and everything from an iPhone or from any other mobile device. And so, for example, this my friend over in Florida, David, had done this. They were doing some local marketing for, I believe it was a spa. So they were on site, walking around the spa, demonstrating to people the facilities and what treatments were on offer. And that's just taking your marketing to a whole new level. So it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that is really, really exciting as somebody who does quite a bit of offline stuff. It's not even something I'd ever really considered, the fact that you could just take your cell, mobile as you might say, and actually walk around with it and actually do sort of a Hangout straight from that device. Now, what I really love about this Newscaster software is just the fact that we can just go through these. These are just quick templates I put together. They're saved, so I can use them whenever I like, or you can actually upload your own stuff. It's really easy to customize. Absolutely, absolutely fantastic piece of technology. So obviously, I'm quite sort of enamored with this at the moment. But I really should probably ask you another question. And okay. This one, I think it's a little bit of they know that the answer is going to be yes. It's how can I sell high-ticket products, and I think they're really looking for maybe a little more detail. They probably feel quite nervous about the thought and think, well, is this something I can actually do?
Mm-hmm. I guess this is tying to the earlier question about building lists and building trust. Because if you were to go from an absolute newbie and think, okay, I'm going to develop a webinar, my first product, and I'm going to sell it for $1,000 right at the bat, some people will manage it. For most people, that may be a bit of a challenge. So what I suggest inside my course and with all my new students is that do it in baby steps. Make it easy for yourself. So again, build your audience, do some free presentations first, build your list, then do a lower ticket price product. And this is what a lot of the guys in the forum space do. They'll sell a low ticket product so they get a lot of buyers. They build a huge list of buyers, which is a critical point. You don't really want a big list of people that are never going to buy from you. But if you can do a low ticket product to get a lot of buyers on your list, it gives people exposure to your style, your teaching, the quality of your products. Then at that point, if you are ready to offer to them a higher ticket product, they're much more likely to buy because they've had a history with you, they've interacted, they've seen the quality of your stuff. So it's not such a huge leap of faith to part with $400, $1,000 for some unknown guy you've never heard of before who's suddenly on a webinar. And I've done that technique with a number of clients last year. I specialized in launches last year, which is kind of tiring, and I'm getting back to webinars now because they're less intensive. But on a launch, if you build a buyers list of a couple of thousand people on the front end, which is very, very achievable, then as part of the process, once they've bought in, they have a chance to look at your product, you would do a follow-up webinar to them, again delivering higher content, more value, and then you would offer them a higher ticket product, which is a standard process. So that could be a 297, a 497, a 997 product, and those clear really well. And typically, those would clear a six-figure price point. I've done that several times last year with clients. Jeff Hershey, we did offline Top Gun. We developed a front-end product which we sold for about $10 and just built a really large front-end buyers list. And then we presented a webinar to them afterwards. I think we cleared $127,000 in a week by using that strategy. So that's what I would suggest. If you're brand new and you're starting off, make your life easy. Don't start trying to climb Everest as your first hill ever. Just do it in baby steps and develop your skills, become more confident, and gain the trust of your audience, and then everything will be smooth sailing.
With these sort of webinar that I did, the actual funnel started off with a product that was initially started off at $199, moved up to $299. So it wasn't a particularly sort of low-priced product. And this is in the market where people may be spending $10 a month. So I was kind of thinking, I'm probably overreaching with this. And then I spoke to you about webinars. I was like, could I sell them something more expensive? And eventually came up with this sort of huge, ginormous package, which was $5,000. Now, if I'd actually been aware right from the start of how powerful webinars were, right at the start, maybe I would have made that a lower priced, sort of offer just to get people in. But regardless, it works really, really well. We sold 13 copies, $5,000, which was absolutely amazing. And this was in a market where people aren't used to webinars; they're not used to being marketed to. It's a real hobby niche, and I think if I'd actually thought about the funnel a little more, I could have actually made an awful lot more cash. But it absolutely blew me away, the results, and people were just so happy as well to have that level of interactivity. We had loads of questions coming in, and I literally found the method so powerful, and it actually gave me the confidence to go out there and say, we have got all these things we can offer you. You really will get a lot of sort of value for this. And actually put it out there and sell it, because whilst I was confident we could deliver, I didn't know if people would ever buy at that price in the market where I was completely unknown. And it's 100% down to webinars and Webinar Alchemy specifically that I actually managed to do that. It really gave me the confidence to say, I have got all these things I can offer. I really should be putting them out there. And I've said it before, I do want to say a huge, huge thank you for actually helping me out with that, letting me have early access to Webinar Alchemy. It made such a huge difference. And then also in Orlando as well, you gave me so many great, great tips. And I'll be honest, I'm still implementing, I'm still learning. I'm so far from an expert, it's ridiculous. But as you can see, I think I've done pretty well, at least to start with.
Yeah, I think that's a great start. And again, what you mentioned there, it brought up another point, that a lot of people, they're nervous to offer a higher ticket product because they don't think that they have the value to add to people. But what you will find is that if you have a number of people that want to buy the lower ticket front-end product and spend a little bit of money and try and figure it out for themselves, there will always be a percentage of your market that want additional help. They want extra access to you. And you have to value your time. If you're busy, you're marketing, you have to look at the time it would take to help somebody individually or as a group compared to how you'd be spending your time generating revenue on other strategies or other tactics or other ways of running your business. So you've got to charge a premium price if you're going to provide people access to you. And a lot of people want to do done with you. It's not like a done for you thing where you say, okay, I'll do it all for you, but they want to do done with you. And for that, they're willing to pay the premium price. So if you're worried about, oh, I'm only selling it for $47 on the front end, there will always be people that want direct access to you, maybe a Skype call once a week or a group call, some strategy sessions, some extra group training, and people will always pay a premium for that. Because if you can demonstrate to them at the end of the day, if paying you $500, $1,000, $2,000, whatever, is going to get them to their goal that much faster and make them generate revenue all the quicker, and of course it's a no-brainer. So that's definitely something to consider.
I really appreciate everybody obviously taking the time to actually jump on this this Hangout, and it's really great that people have them. For me, if they just tuned in just to see that little bit, it's more than worth it, because you literally went through like 4 or 5 different things that people could put together to sell a high-ticket product, which I think is one of those where people think, what can I actually put in? And you talk about that personal access. You talk about maybe weekly Skype calls. And this is something that somebody can put together, rather than go Robert's way of actually just doing webinars and delivering the products via webinars. I think there are so many options, and if people actually go through Webinar Alchemy, I think they'll both see that it's really possible to sell high ticket. It's very rapid in terms of you run it, you get the cash in, as I said earlier. I think that's incredibly powerful. And you get that trust element. As you actually say in the training, there are so many different types of webinars that you can do, and one of them that you talked about, which was the only one I was doing, was that whole branding approach. And for me, that was all I was doing. But if you actually combine all the methods that you actually talk about in there, that can basically be it for your business. I don't think you would even actually have to go outside webinars. And in a day and age when everybody's saying, try this, try sort of this new Amazon machine, or try this new PLR thing, or try CPA. There are so many things. Maybe there's a new Pinterest pigeon loophole product out there. There are so many things like that. And they're all valid. They're all great. But if you're actually wanting to enter a new niche, particularly, I think you can just start off with webinars. You don't have to worry about anything else. So with that said, moving on to this next question, it's kind of the counterpoint. Can you actually, is it even worth trying to do webinars with low-ticket products?
Yes, I would say yes. They are traditionally used for higher ticket products. I've seen people use webinars very effectively now on a product launch. So if they're doing a low ticket launch with a lot of buyers, they will maybe do a pre-webinar where just before the cart opens, people will do a webinar to answer all the questions and answers, walk people through the product, and make them comfortable with the buying process and know everything before the offer goes live. That's very effective. And as I mentioned before, anything you're doing with a webinar that's going to make you more comfortable with the technology, make you more comfortable presenting, being in front of people, I'd say is always a bonus. But your end goal will be to develop higher ticket products. That's the whole point of a webinar. You don't really need to spend an hour convincing people to buy something that's $47. That can be achieved in a sales page. Obviously, there's other bonuses on the interactivity and the questions and answers and the intel on your intended sales audience from a webinar, but you don't need to do it for that. I'd always look at using them for higher tickets, for masterminds, for coaching, for advanced training. That's really where they come into play, and that's when you need to use all of the elements of interactivity and the more bonding with your audience.
Yeah, well,
that was a waffly answer, wasn't it?
I think it illustrates a good point that webinars are so much more powerful at selling high-ticket stuff. That's a great place to go. But I do think you're right about also using them to pre-sell. For instance, I was promoting Paul Clifford's Kudani content kind of grabbing system, and we did a pre-sort of launch webinar for that, and it was really, really powerful to be able to actually connect with people and explain and sort out a few sort of misconceptions. Now, that wasn't a low-ticket price product, but actually what you're saying about using webinars to actually, just prep people before launch, warm them up, get their questions answered, get those concerns out of the way, is absolutely fantastic. And that is really, really powerful. And it's something I certainly intend to do an awful lot more, because it really does help out your subscribers. It helps out your audience. And we got one sort of interesting question here is, will these strategies that you're teaching work with Hangouts? And I think you've kind of already answered this about the reliability and interactivity, but I'll just see if you've got anything else to add there.
Yeah, the techniques you're using in a Hangout is basically interactivity, questions and answers, having a stronger connection with your audience. So of course you can do that from a Hangout as well. It's more difficult sometimes to have a structured environment, and there is that extra I guess uncertainty that you're on camera the whole time. especially if you're getting hit with questions that you don't know what they're going to be. Whereas on a webinar, it's more pre-programmed. You've got your slides, your presentation, you're lined up for that. I would say that Hangouts right now are good as something to be an extra element to tag on with webinars. I don't think if you were just doing a sales event, you would want to really be using your Hangout itself. As I mentioned before, if you were trying to field the questions and answers, you're looking at two different screens, you're bouncing backwards and forwards. Hangouts don't intrinsically have registration pages associated with them, so you're not building a list from a Hangout. I don't think you can really gather the data or results of the analysis at the back end of a Hangout that you can on a webinar. You can't run the reports to see how many attended, what the questions were, what their interest level were, where they dropped off. None of that is available on a Hangout that you can do from a webinar. And also, when you get to the buying process, when you're ready to give people a URL for sales, the best you can do on a Hangout would be to use the branding app that Steve has on the screen right now. Whereas on the webinar, you can actually push out the buyer's URL to everybody in the questions and answers box. So they just need to click on one link to go and access the product. Whereas in here, if you were looking at buying straight from this Hangout, you're looking at the Steve Benn, it's www.imarketer.co/webinar-alchemy. You got to go and type all that in. So a bunch of people will mistype it, they'll get 404s, they're busy typing, they're not paying attention to your presentation, they've lost track of what you're saying. If you can give people a link, it's going, click here, boom, that's it. That makes it a lot easier. And the easier that you can make it for your customers to go and buy, the more buyers you're going to have. It's not really rocket science, but that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah, and that's actually that's really a good point. Probably around half of the people that are actually on this Hangout are people who've already actually bought Webinar Alchemy, and they just wanted to see this interview, get a little more background, and also figure out, exactly what questions they could ask, what they were unsure of, and get sort of live responses. But for anybody who hasn't got Webinar Alchemy, you've got this ridiculous URL at the bottom, imarketer.co/webinar-alchemy. And I've got basically 20 sort of bonuses on that, which I'll go through in a little bit. But if you just visit that page, it lists them all. It's an absolutely massive, massive bonus pack with a lot of exclusives about sort of the niches I've been working in, everything sort of from web hosting to yoga, and some crazy hobby niches as well. So that's well worth checking out. So if you want to actually bring that up on your screen, have a look through. If you've not already signed up, it's well worth a look. But like Stephen said, this whole sort of, it's great to have the authority thing at the bottom here, but there is also this thing of you can't click the URL, etc. So we've got quite a sort of an understandable question here, I think, something that's probably on a lot of people's minds. Basically, it's, I'm shy. How can I actually present a webinar?
How can I present a webinar? Could you clarify that a little bit further? You mean physically present a webinar, or?
I think actually, and looking at the question, I think actually what they're actually meaning is they're a little shy to actually go on camera, and I think the first thing to do is obviously they can actually just have slides with a webinar. They don't need to be on camera. But there is also this opportunity, and I'm guessing this is what they're actually aiming at or wondering about, is can they actually get somebody else to present the webinar for them? So maybe they've created the product, or maybe they've done a deal with somebody, they've done some sort of JV. Is that something they can actually do? Can they go ahead and get somebody else to do it for them?
Yes, yeah, I mean, I understand that a lot of people aren't that comfortable talking, or perhaps they're too busy to do webinars regularly. So it's quite easy to find somebody that could present for you, and then you just give them a percentage of the sales. For example, everybody knows somebody that won't stop talking. You always got a friend that's very, very talkative and very engaging. They're a possibility. There are sites you can go to find voiceover actors as well. One of the marketers that I know very well, Ty Cohen, who has a specific webinar on Kindle products, I think it's called Kindle Cash Fire. He's been running that for a couple of years now. Very successful. I think he generated over $3 million at this point from his webinar. But he found out that doing webinars, because he was so popular and booked, was cutting into his time. He loves traveling with his family. He's always on holiday. He's always taking time off. Every time you see a post on Facebook, he's somewhere else. So basically what he did was, inside of his product itself, he said to his buyers, does anybody know this product really well? You'd be happy presenting or trying to do an audition for presenting my webinar because I'm looking for somebody to take over. So he took a guy from England called Tom, who's the last name I can't remember. Hope he's not watching. And he has Tom do all the presentations from that. So Tom comes on and says, hey, I was one of Ty's students. I bought the system that really worked. This is what it does. And that segues into the presentation. So Ty is off on cruises and holidays in the Bahamas, taking his children and wife all over the world, not even presenting a webinar. And it's converting every single day and showing with all the JV partners, making him a very nice income. So yes, that can definitely be done.
Absolutely phenomenal, isn't it? Well, we're coming pretty much to the end of this now. So what I want to do is I just want to go through, check if we've had any other questions through, because I just keep glancing, sort of glancing at them and everything, and I just prefer to make sure that we've not missed anything out here. So yeah, we still got.
One thing I would say it might be worth mentioning, Steve, is the webinar that we have coming up. We have a webinar scheduled this week to talk about this in more detail, and where people can actually interact with us more and find out a lot more. We're going to put together a fairly special package for this product. So if you maybe want to give some people some information on that and how they can find out about it and sign up, that would be probably good.
Yeah, we've got a great question actually from Sarah here. If we can just actually go into this. Going on a person's appearance, do you think webinars could actually hurt a launch?
Do you think they could hurt a launch?
Yes, I'm assuming what Sarah's actually saying is if you're really that ugly, could actually you appearing on camera actually ruin any chance of sales? I'm assuming this is some subtle dig at me, Sarah, and this is my normal webinars.
Yeah, inside Webinar Alchemy is a special bonus. We have the brown paper bag with the eyes cut out for really ugly presenters. So if that's a problem, you can get around your Hangout issues with the patented Webinar Alchemy brown paper bag.
Thanks a lot. Do you think you've got time just maybe to answer a couple more questions that we just had come in, Stephen?
Yeah, sure.
So can you... right, I see what's... going on here. Are you able just to buy an email list and then actually use that to actually fill up your webinar? So rather than building a list, can you go out and buy a list?
Yes, you can do that. One of the, I'll chat about this more in the webinar later this week. But as part of one of my products is a piece of software that helps you get more people on your webinars and make sure that they actually turn up.
Sure.
One of the issues that some people have is that people register for the webinar and then they will forget, or they'll get busy, or something else distracts them, they don't turn up. So I have a specific piece of software which has all kinds of fantastic bells and whistles in it, which we don't want to get into during this call. But one of the beta users from India, the guy in my JV group, I gave him access to this piece of software, the same as Steve did the course. And Aravinda did that. He used solo ads, which is basically where you buy an email drop. Somebody will send an email on your behalf and they'll charge you for it. So he used that very, very effectively with this piece of software to drive registrations to other people's webinars. So he wasn't even doing the webinars himself. I think in a piece of really ninja reverse outsourcing.
Yeah.
This young kid from India then outsources all his webinars to JV partners here in the States, drives traffic using solo ads with this piece of software, and he generated $150,000 in 4 months by using these strategies with paid traffic lists and solo drops. So yes, that can definitely be an option as well.
Yeah, I just actually had a question about, will there be a replay of this and what page will it be on? Well, it'll actually be on exactly the same page that you're viewing this on. So what will happen is once everything's sort of been encoded, the replay will actually appear here. There's one question from Ken, and I'm going to actually edit out the name here because I don't think it's fair on the actual person who's got the products out there. But how do you feel that Webinar Alchemy compares to other products? Because for me, this product made a huge, huge difference to me. It was like so far ahead. I'm assuming, obviously, because it's it's something you spent so long on, you put it together for the very fact that there just wasn't something out there really answering all of these issues. For me, there were loads of things that I just wasn't aware of with webinars.
Yeah. this is where I have to raise my hand and admit to being a terrible marketer, because one of the big things that people should be doing is getting their products out quickly and testing them and tweaking them and changing them. I was a bit of an anal perfectionist with this. Retentive perfectionist in that I wanted the product to be perfect, and I took over a year putting this together. So I'm a little bit biased, but I do think that this is probably the most comprehensive course on webinars. There's a year of work in this. There's tens of thousands of dollars being spent developing the software, and it was built to cover everything from A to Z. I don't think at the end of that product there's anything else you need to help you do webinars. And Steve did $65K on his webinar with it. Robert Stokes did $240,000 a year based on that information. The strategies and tactics covered are the same that my JV partners have used, and they've used in all these launches that we do. So yeah, I'm quite biased, obviously, because it's my product, but I don't think there's anything better covering online events out there.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it is a little bit of a loaded, difficult question to answer, but I mean, I started off with WSO webinars, and that was literally just what got me started. It gave me the very basics, and that was probably 2 or 3 years ago now. And I've spoken to my list about that product and everything. It was a fine product. It got me started. It was $10. The difference though between that and this, and you can go out and you can spend a lot of money trying to learn about webinars, things like that. It doesn't compare to Webinar Alchemy. I can, really, really say that. The amount of content in there, the software you've got, like the newscaster, just so many good extra things. You've got, I think, 30-something blueprints?
There's a lot of different templates and blueprints. There's also another piece of software we haven't even talked about yet at all. I know we're running a bit short on time, but there's a piece of software that allows you to do engagement strategies with your audience. So again, what you want to do with the webinar is engage your audience as much as possible, so get them interacting with you, answering questions. And there's a strategy called micro commitments. So basically, I'm trying to think of a PG-rated example of this. Say, for example, you're dating a girl. You met a very pretty girl, and your end goal is to get her to marry you. You're not going to start off and go, "Hi, will you marry me?" All right? You've got to get a number of yeses along the path to get into that. The big yes that's the end result. So a micro commitment would be getting somebody to say yes to, would you like to go to the movies? Would you like to go for dinner? Would you like to go on a date? Blah blah blah. So it's a lot of smaller yeses that are a lot easier for somebody to say yes to. And the selling process, typically online, is like that as well. If you get people into a yes state and get them agreeing with you on smaller steps along the way, when you get to the big goal, which of course isn't to marry you, but to say yes and buy the high-ticket product, if they've been saying yes all along the way, it's a lot easier to do that. So this other piece of software is specifically designed to help do that. And you do that through the use of contests where you put a prize together, where people will do small things like tweet on social media, repost something on Facebook, make a comment, and they all get a number of points during that process, and they'll say, hey, at the end of the webinar, we'll give away an iPad or a Kindle or whatever prize you want. That encourages people to spread the word about your event. It gets the micro commitments happening. And again, if people are worried about making a sale or how good their sales techniques are, this makes it all easier because the software gets the yeses for you.
Yeah, again, another sort of really powerful part of the package. So I think we're probably at the point where we're just about probably ready to wrap up here. Just having a look. Right. What is that software that was used to drive traffic to other webinars?
That's something we're going to go into more detail on the webinar itself.
Yeah.
There's not time during this Hangout to go into, and this is really not a sales presentation. It's
yeah, exactly.
Me and Steve chatting about the techniques and what you can do. So if you want to hear all about that software, I'll go into it on detail on the webinar later this week.
Yeah, I'll pop a link to the webinar shortly for people to sign up if they're interested, which they should be, actually below the replay and everything, which will actually be on this very same page. So with that all said, I just want to say a big, big thank you to Stephen, both for actually helping me out with webinars and agreeing to do this interview with all its ludicrous audio problems and headphones falling out and things like that. If you can get one invented that actually stays in, I've just literally taken mine out now because I haven't on my head at an angle to keep it in. Yeah, that would be absolutely fantastic.
You'll see me on the next webinar with gaffer tape, just holding it in place.
Might be worth going on Shark Tank or Dragon's Den or something with that. But like I say, thanks so much, Stephen. I really appreciate it. I know from all of the comments that we've had that it's been really appreciated. People have got a lot of value from this, and yeah, I look forward to actually doing that follow-up webinar with you.
Definitely. Do you want to just tell people when it is right now, Steve, so they've got an idea of when we're doing it?
Yeah, I wish I'd actually written it down, but I think it's this Thursday, isn't it? And I think it's at the same time, which is 2 p.m. But if I'm wrong on that, please correct me now because I've not actually got it on my screen. I don't want to be looking off in a weird direction.
Sure. No, I believe it is it's Thursday at 2 o'clock, so I guess Steve will be sending us the invite to that fairly soon and putting the link under here. So I'll cover things in a lot more detail. We're going to put together a fairly special package for Steve's list, so it's definitely worth coming to that because you're going to see more things that we haven't covered, and there'll be a pretty amazing offer. So hopefully we'll see you guys on Thursday at 2 p.m. on the webinar.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stephen. Like you say, it's not possible and always appropriate to cover everything, but I'm really looking forward to going over the software that you just mentioned. So with that said, I'll wrap up this hangout and say again, thanks to Stephen Renton, and the replay will be up shortly along with that webinar link. Okay then, thanks a lot then, Stephen.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.